Welcome everyone. This is the third Q&A, and I just want to say welcome to all the new members. Okay, the first question, this is from Beata. Okay, path or reflection? A question has come to my mind after reading some responses. An identity of who I used to be has dissolved quite a bit. I don't know who I am anymore. Things that I used to like fell off. I am floating through days. Not only am I aware of my ego, but egos of other people I interact with. It feels draining at times. It feels like something I can't be. It feels like sometimes I can't be my authentic self and need to play a role society requires. The question is this path on the journey that we go through, is this a path on the journey that we go through, or simply a reflection of showing me that I am not resonating or connecting with myself? If so, how do I connect with myself or find areas of where I am disconnected with myself? I do know that everything is a reflection of me, so I sense that I am disconnected from myself. Thank you. Do you have any thoughts, Joe?
Um, well, initially, I think it's just very, very normal to feel different in so many ways with not identifying with this thing that you thought that you were for a long time, and then it becomes different or unrecognizable after, doing a lot of processing or having some insights and things change. Um, I mean that will just happen continually, on the path because uh, you're seeing more of what's there, and that's going to sort of redefine the thing that you think of as yourself. And then, especially if there's like some big shifts, that's going to be quite unrecognizable from what you've been used to for so long. Um, so I think my initial reaction is just that that's completely normal and expected. Um, and then floating through days. Yeah, and then becoming aware of other people's egos, I think it becomes more evident, the more that you look at yourself of what that is in other people as well, because your ego relates to the perceived ego in others. That's
Yeah.
the way that it operates. So I guess as you become more and more aware of your own ego, you can see what it is, you can sort of see it more for what it is rather than being identified with it all of the time. You can see as you see more of that, you'll see more of what it is interacting with in others as well.
Yeah. So of course, yeah, I agree. It's like completely normal. And one thing that I was going to say is, you said I'm floating through days. So I'm guessing it's like you don't know what to do. You don't have the interests that you used to have could be gone. And one thing that I think is useful to say is that the deeper that you awaken, there's this weird thing that happens, which is um, the ability to slowly just enjoy doing absolutely nothing. And that's what can often be very confusing and can be interpreted as I don't know what to do anymore, or I don't have any those same interests. And so what do I do with myself? And yeah, there are moments to do things, but sometimes you can literally just look out the window or just something like that, go on a walk, and you're not actually doing anything. You're not producing anything. You're not doing anything useful except just maybe enjoying your vision, what you're looking at, what you're hearing. And so I think that by saying that, then you might be like, oh, sometimes I was trying to fill this moment thinking that I always have to be doing and doing, but I don't feel like doing those things. And so those are the moments that maybe you can just enjoy the emptiness of being able to just experience your senses. And it can be if you sit, let's say, in your living room doing nothing and you're just looking at your living room for like 10 minutes or even 5 minutes, that can be a good practice because maybe even in 5 minutes you'll feel something, some anxiety, because it seems like our whole body is like programmed to think that doing this sort of thing, like sitting down and doing nothing, is wrong. So it's like immediately you can get very anxious, and so that's just another experience that you can have. And there's just one more thing that I'm trying to remember. Well, I was just going to say, like you said, I'm aware of my ego, but the egos of other people I interact with. I just wanted to say that, if somebody's very angry, you can just see because you can physically see it, right? But just wanted to stress that you can never perceive the ego of another person, not directly. So whatever it is that you're seeing and feeling in your body is only ever your ego. So this can get a little bit confusing and tricky. So there was one example that I just thought of, which is, let's say that you're speaking to someone and there's a possibility, but it's not very obvious that they're being arrogant or they're trying to show off. But it's not very obvious. They're not, doing it on purpose. It seems. And then let's say that in your mind, you feel this kind of like this person is so arrogant, but there's this kind of feeling, there's an experience happening within you. That's an example of you cannot directly experience their ego. Whether they're being arrogant or they're not being arrogant, that experience only is happening inside of them. Whatever you feel in you cannot be another person. It's literally impossible. So I think it's interesting to kind of play with that and see certain times maybe if there's judgment. Remember, there's nothing wrong with judging, if it's in your mind, especially. But notice if there's a lot of deep judgment for people. And then sometimes try to see if you think that it's about them. Like, oh, I'm sure they're doing this. And then pull back and realize this is all just happening within you. Right? It's just I think a good practice.
Yeah, I was just going to add on the point of it feels like sometimes I can't be my authentic self. I need to play a role society requires. Um, I think you can become a lot more disillusioned with what society does demand of you because it demands generally an egoic acting role. So, the less you're uh, connecting or resonating with what you once were like or once you were doing, um, that's very normal as well to see like, oh, I don't relate to this persona and this role within society anymore. I mean that will be the case because society, that's how society is. So we sort of have to sometimes step into these roles that it does demand of us. But the key thing is that you will identify less and less with those roles, and some you might not be able to do anymore because it's just not important to you anymore. And also to Steve's point about not doing the things that you once did, I think that can freak our egos out a bit because, especially in my own experience, things like motivation, um, ambition, these things just declined until they evaporated and disappeared completely. And if your ego is very much attached to those sorts of things, it can be like, oh, I should be doing these things. I associate being productive and motivated and ambitious and with my job or these things is like unquestionably good. Whereas as you go further, you'll see that they amount to nothing. That there's no ambition to fill. There's no purpose to be lived. There's just the enjoyment of what's happening. But I think it's you can very much accept some resistance to that because the ego, of course, it loves to be productive. It loves to do things and be recognized for doing them. Um, so yeah, for that point.
What you said about ambition, I can almost hear the ego's response to that, which is like, oh, if you don't have ambition, then you don't want to live anymore, right? You
Yeah,
don't want to do anything,
ambition,
right?
purpose,
Purpose.
meaning. Yeah, purpose is the biggest one.
It can sound odd, so I want to clarify this. So if I were to say I have no purpose and I have no ambition and I have no meaning in my life, that sounds very depressing. That sounds very, it doesn't sound good. But if you don't have ambition, it doesn't mean that you don't want to live, right? It's like ambition is actually not just desire, a desire. For example, I desire to go for a walk. That will exist even in enlightenment, right? If you could call that a desire. I want to do this, I want to do that. Ambition is this sickness where it feels like yearning and you're going after something in a very, I don't know what the word would be, a very desperate way, actually. And then people call it, I'm very ambitious and I want to be a very successful person. But when there is this, like, I have to do it, I have to do it, I have to get to this level, then finally, when they kill themselves, working and working to get at this level, well, what happens is the ego is never satisfied. And so they're going to create a new goal, a new, thing that they have to reach, and it never stops. And
Yeah.
so that's what ambition is. So you could literally not have this ambition and still have a business. It's just that you don't have this relationship with it. If it's not growing, like you're gonna rip your hair out, and this is, oh, it's an obsession. That's a good word. Ambition and obsession is sort of like the same thing. Um, oh, you want to say something?
It's also like a very clear declaration of now, right now is not enough. Like
Yeah,
the simple, whatever's going on right now is not enough and it has to change. And that's almost never the case. Usually right now it's just fine. Um, but it's one of, I think, society's biggest egoic tricks that most people buy into is that like being ambitious is good. And you can really reduce it to everything that Steve just said. And think like what is wrong with the here and now. And but again, the ego won't like that. And what you have to remember is, again, what Steve said is that it doesn't mean that those things can still be done. You can still have a business, but your relation to it completely changes. It's more about outcomes don't dictate your well-being. It's
yeah,
like you're almost uh, uh, gifted this state of I don't mind. I don't mind the outcome. You just adapt to what happens rather than I must steer this in this ever growing upward trajectory.
yeah. And the final thing I want to say is, so it says, it feels like sometimes I can't be my authentic self and need to play a role society requires. So this is kind of funny because what most people mean by this is, I've realized that there's a deeper, like, there's a higher self or whatever you want to call it. There's a deeper experience. And when I go out in the world and talk to people who are not awakening, I kind of have to tiptoe around them. I can't say this, I can't say that. And then people think that that's your authentic self. And in reality, I would say that to actually be 100% authentic, you'd have to be enlightened and you'd have to have felt all of the pain in the psyche to be actually 100% authentic at all moments. And I say that because when we are reluctant to play a role, our mind is filled with roles, is just another way to say ego parts. So, if there's the angry one and the jealous one, these are, you could call roles. They don't really exist, right? They're these characters. And so it can actually be a powerful practice in those moments when you're around people that are not awakening. It's very obvious to you. You can't speak to them about this stuff. And then you step into the character that is exactly like them. That's what you don't want to be. So some people they start learning about all this spiritual stuff, like timelines and all this stuff, and then they think that they have all this like very special knowledge. And when they speak to the guy on the street or somebody like, making their coffee that is not having that experience, they think, oh, this person doesn't get it at all, right? I can't talk to them about this, and so I have to be fake. Actually, that's not true. The the reason why we want to share that stuff is also coming from the ego. Almost like this is the only worthwhile conversation is to talk about spirituality. And if this human that's right in front of me wants to talk about the weather or the news, even, right? In spirituality, it's like, oh, I don't watch the news anymore. And somebody's telling you about the news. That is a moment for you to try to embody another part of your ego that you're rejecting, which is, I'm exactly like this person. I'm not just this spiritual, special being. So why don't I pretend? And you could call it pretending. And you talk to that person. And what your ego doesn't want is for them to think that you're not special. So it's almost like you want them to know that you're smarter, you're deeper. Now, if you just talk about the news, pretending that you like talking about the news, that's what the ego doesn't want. For you to be equal to this person that the ego thinks is inferior. Oh, this person is not awake. So I think that it can be very useful to do that sort of thing, to enter that same analogy that I keep saying, to be an actor. If you can be an actor and go into that role, it can be very beneficial.
Yeah, and you can see the level of judgment that's there in you in those moments, whereas like this person is not on my level and I judge them for it.
Yeah, they're ordinary, but I'm special somehow.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't want to be ordinary. Um, okay. So the next question is from Tony. Fundamental no to life. While in meditation, I came in contact with a very deep sense of saying no to life, to the experience of each moment. It actually feels more like a way of perceiving experience rather than a felt sense. It felt so fundamental to the way I'm experiencing life that it felt like I had no choice but to see life in this way. And this is probably constantly running in the background, but I needed to be very still in order to become conscious of it. I'd be grateful to receive some insight around this from Steve and Joe about how we could work with this and what possibly brought it about. Is it a result of unexpressed anger, lack of love for my mother, other unmet emotional needs? Thanks. Um, and then I'm just going to read just so it makes more sense because I asked him if he could give me an example. And he said, so in my everyday life, I feel like I'm very quick to doubt people, to feel an opinion is wrong or incomplete. Like whatever I eat could be a bit better. I'm constantly trying to fix things, improve them. Things need to be exciting to the point of making me anxious. Otherwise, I'm bored and agitated. There's probably more there, but I think that's enough examples. Okay, so let me just do you have something, Joe?
Um, I'm just thinking, nothing like very clear initially, but some things that came to mind were um that saying no to life is a very fearful thing to do. You know, it's a very like sort of protective um mechanism to not allow the vulnerabilities of maybe what saying yes or just allowing, you know, the sort of natural emotional response to sort of come through would be. Um, and this like consistent position of doubt and incompleteness. Um, yeah, I'm not sure there's anything there for you.
Yeah, let me just see here. Like something that came to my mind is so obviously it's like every answer we have to start with this is absolutely normal. Uh, but it's like it's not that there's anything wrong that needs to be fixed in that sense, but yeah, that's kind of a good point to make. It's like everything that we think is wrong with us doesn't actually make us wrong. It's just that what you want is to be suffering less. So I don't know if that's clear. It's like it's not like imagine like this problem that Tony has, right? It's right here in my hand. And then it's like this is not like wrong, it's just pain. So I just wanted to make that clear. And yeah, let me try to something came and then I forgot. Oh, that the description that he gave me the example where there's a lot of activity happening. And that's the image in my mind. It's like I'm very quick to doubt people. This opinion is wrong. I could be like there's this like constant activity. And I think that this is sort of, I don't know if it's correct to say flight or fight mode almost. It's like there's this like agitation, like he said, he used that word. And I'm just trying to think. It's like we're kind of like stumped.
I think
Um,
it's because an example that I don't necessarily relate directly to in my own experience. So I'm just trying to pick up on what I can. That's I think another thing that sort of popped out to me was the sort of question of where it came from. I don't think that's necessarily a direct thing I'd be able to answer, but I know that that's the general desire to have answers to these things can be a bit of a distraction as well. I know it's like really unsatisfying to hear that like the reasons don't matter necessarily. As in like you once you've seen the pain and you've seen what it is, it's there for you to work with. And maybe the reason or the like what happened might reveal itself through the processing, but getting caught up with examining, um I heard a good analogy once, which is like you're almost like throwing up this like repressed emotion, then you have all this like junk, and then our egos want to take a magnifying glass out and start looking at it and examining it and like labeling it, whereas you've already, you're already in the process of doing the important thing. um But yeah, that was just for that final tacked on question.
and I was just gonna the question like where did it come from? Th- I think the most direct thing to say is that all of our problems, all of our issues and things that are difficult for us literally is coming from three sources. And it's like all of the tears you haven't cried, all of the anger you haven't released, and fear is a tricky one because it's harder to access. So either in a long meditation you can feel fear coming up, but it's like that's like three different emotions, the main emotions that we suppressed. And so the more think of it like someone that had a really severe, like severe abuse. Like it's more rare, where it was so severe, and then you notice that the person, maybe even physically, they seem a little bit off. Like they have like maybe tics and they're shaking. That is like the most extreme example of a burdened nervous system, right? And all of that is just a unbelievable amount of suppressed emotions. So this sort of thing that's happening, this constant activity, you could call it very chaotic, is coming from that. So the simple answer is to, just work with the emotions, release them. But the other thing I was going to say, it's kind of hard because sometimes I don't know what to say. Like awareness also comes to mind, where I'm not sure if like how much experience he has with his awareness. Maybe I could talk a little bit about that. Um, you know, you could practice awareness in meditation, but I think the easiest way, the most like day to day, you can do it all the time to practice awareness, which is this ability to observe. So observe all of this activity as a witness. And how you do this, and I mean, it can be boring. That's why you have to have a lot of will and interest in this stuff because you have to do it so many times. Um, if you're watching a video and you see your attention, let's say there's a person in the video speaking, your attention is going to that. What are they saying? Awareness is the ability to be watching the person. It's a multitasking. It's like the ultimate multitasking. And as you're watching the person speaking in the video, there is this thing, awareness, that's watching you. So if the person says something that you don't like, you will notice in the same moment that you heard them speaking those words, you'll say, wow, look at this anger, this little bit of anger here, or these very negative thoughts. And it sounds so simple that every human being should be doing this, and almost nobody's capable of this. They're absolutely lost in either what they're looking at or their thoughts, and there's no observing this stuff, right? So that may be helpful to practice. So it's like you're always kind of asking yourself, what am I thinking in this moment? What am I feeling? It's like a pulling away your attention away from what you're looking at, what you're listening to what's going on within. And you can do it back and forth. You listen to the person, how am I feeling? Oh, and then they keep talking. Oh, there's this now, and there's more. And this requires so much practice because, like I said, your mind will pull your attention away from watching. It's very difficult. Do you have something?
Yeah, I just wrote a quick note, which was although the exact experience I'm not familiar with in my own experience. With anything like Steve said, what you can also do because you've noticed this now is to approach it with open curiosity. And you can maybe sit with some of these examples as they come up, because inevitably, whatever it is, it all comes down to the same thing. You'll do this, and then there'll be some repressed emotion, and there'll be some processing. Whatever it is, it all sort of comes down to that. But now you've seen this, so that's like a big thing, and the fact that it had to happen in stillness, as you wrote, shows how maybe deep and consistent it is in your moment-to-moment experience. So maybe you might get the opportunity to notice this more frequently, and then you can start to um, experiment or play with it. If you see a time where you're particularly saying no to something, I'll just use one of the examples that you gave. Um, um, Yeah, so like when you're eating something and you think it could be a bit better, maybe sit with that thought and what comes up, when you're looking at your meal and you're thinking like this could be better. Um, Notice what's happening in your body, see if you can challenge it perhaps, or just um yeah, you can experiment with it, and see like where greater or less discomfort comes. Because inevitably, if you sit with something for long enough, it will start to show more of itself. So it'll start, if it starts like this, you'll start to see a bit more. And then there might be some, not answers in like, where did this come from, but answers to like, what's this protecting me from? Because if this is like a default mechanism of yours in particular, it's probably keeping you safe from your nervous system and egoic perspective, from feeling something that you've since childhood felt unsafe to feel. You know, maybe if this like saying no mechanism isn't there, then that opens the door to like a lot of anger or like a lot of sadness or something like that. Um, yeah.
And so I was going to add that long term, to make it like that, to really answer this as directly as possible, long term, the way that all of this chaos will become like it'll either maybe go away completely or you're just going to see a big difference. It's a lot less in your experience, is literally coming from crying and releasing anger, pretty much those two. So that's like the long term meaning. How is this going to be fixed? How am I going to see this become less? It's only by releasing emotions. Now, the other thing, while this is still your experience, what I was going to say is first I talked about awareness, right? So in the example that you gave, I'm quick to doubt people, to feel like an idea, an opinion is wrong. So this awareness thing, it's so fascinating because the more that you notice that you're able to observe like a witness, the more that you can see that, for example, thinking that an idea is wrong, when you're watching that as a witness, you'll see that that's made up. It is literally just a thought in your mind. I know better than this person. They are wrong. When you are when awareness is not familiar to you, you kind of fully believe that. Like it's very serious. They're wrong. But when you zoom out in your awareness, you're like, wow, I can see that this is literally just a feeling in my body and a thought, like they're wrong, and I believe it. You can watch all of this activity. Now, when you become more familiar with awareness by practicing over and over, what I was going to say is what can also help. This is like another thing. So I said releasing emotions is what would kind of fix this, but something else that is a very high level of self-love is to allow all of this to happen and do it on purpose. So this can sound almost like it's not even a thing, but when you're doing that, when you're quick to doubt people and all this stuff, you're not really doing it on purpose. It is an activity in your mind that maybe you're kind of starting to notice. So if you're quick to doubt people and you have a little bit more awareness, then if you're not doing this at people, this is just happening in your own mind. I would embrace all of that as an experiment. So you look at someone and you think that they're completely wrong. say it on purpose instead of this being just in your background. So it might be back here, oh, this person is completely wrong, but you're not really claiming it. And so I would claim it and I would maybe even say it out loud if nobody can hear you, like, that guy is completely wrong. Like he's just, and you can add whatever you want. He's an idiot. It doesn't matter. Embracing it, right? Instead of just, there's a huge difference between this stuff kind of floating in the background of your mind and you kind of going there and looking directly at it and saying it out loud. This is like a complete shift.
Yeah, that really actually is a great point because that really makes me think it's just suppressing immense rage at every
Yeah.
point because it's like this person is wrong would be the first thing to start saying, and then this person is a fucking idiot and I hate them for how wrong they are would be the next thing that comes. And that's very true for all of your examples, I think, Tony. This food could be better. This food is fucking disappointing. I wish I was at a five-star Michelin restaurant and I hate it here. It's very like natural next step. So I would definitely investigate that. That are all of these examples of saying no really judgments of discontent and anger. That the what other examples were there? Um, yeah, you doubt people. Things could be better. Trying to fix things. Exciting. Things need to be exciting. Like this isn't good enough. Everything is shit. Everything is not good enough for me. Um, yeah,
So
yeah,
I was going to add, it's funny, like as we're talking, then I think it's just a natural process of seeing deeper and deeper into it. Maybe it wasn't so obvious. Um, that this is actually about rage, which is what you said. So what's interesting is that the description of all of this chaos happening, right? Um, the actual truth of all of it, like let's say that you live an entire day of that from the moment you wake up and there's just agitation and agitation, right? This is actually kind of hell to like seriously, it's hell. I've had that so much when I was not very conscious, but I can remember. And then but you live a whole day like that. And when you get home, let's say from work, you've been agitated all day. And so I think this is a very important point to show what pretty much everybody in the world does. And it's sad because it makes life so difficult. You live your whole day, there's all these people speaking to you, then you get an email, you're having all sorts of emotional pain come up that you don't even realize, right? But as this agitation is happening, what's not being done is actually fully owning and realizing how much it bothers you. It bothers you so deeply. And think about how crazy this is. This is how people live in the world. The truth is that you want to scream pretty much. Like after a whole day that you're suppressing your emotions, your body is almost wanting to scream in pain and in agony and in agitation, and you're just nothing, right? You get home, there's no releasing of emotions, and then you cook dinner and you watch a movie and you nothing is happening. And so with all of this chaos, bringing it back to what Joe said about rage, releasing rage would be it's hard because I know you have to develop a relationship with your anger. It doesn't happen in 1 second. But what it will look like as you keep going is when things bother you. So it's crazy that you can't, in the beginning, you can't even notice how much it bothers you. And that's sort of the protect, like it's almost like a protection that is there in your consciousness. It's like you don't even notice it that much. The more attention you give to the fact that you're so angry for a million different reasons, the more you will feel it. And then when it becomes more obvious, then you can start releasing it when you're by yourself. And the most kind of extreme version of this, or when you've gone very deep into your anger, is that to release anger, you could literally just like shake like that for a few seconds, right? Sometimes I do it to the point where I feel like there's no more strength and then I have to stop. So that's to release that energy. And so think about how all of this chaos is happening because it's like a pressure cooker and there's a million emotions arising throughout the day and it's just not being released. And so this it's like a pressure cooker. And so if there's no releasing, the inside of it becomes chaos. So you see how it's completely related. And rage, maybe I'll talk about it later, is responsible for so many other things that I've discovered even in myself, like ADD, right? People think ADD is a mental illness, right? Oh, you're going to have this all your life. No, I've discovered that for me, it is actually related to rage and not releasing rage. Like emotions will literally take your attention away if they're a really huge amount and you're not giving attention to them and it's like a bomb that just wants to explode. Your attention, like I was filming a video and I was getting more frustrated that I didn't like what I was saying, and I had to keep re-recording. And then it started to happen after a very long time because usually it's easy nowadays for me to record. And what would happen is I would be holding my phone. I knew the first sentence that I had to say, and then the next sentence would disappear from my mind. I would forget why. Because I was getting so frustrated and there was no release. There was no acknowledging. I'm so angry. And so after a minute, I realized, oh my God, this is rage. And so what did I do? I stopped trying to film. I did that for a few seconds. I do some pretty extreme things. And a minute later, when I held the phone, I could actually just speak. My attention wasn't being taken away from me. And so that shows you just how much emotions affect us. And I mean, yeah, emotional suppression affects us. Okay. So this is Nicoya. She's a new member. So, hey everyone, let me just open this. Hey everyone, I've been a totally different person for the past 3 years. I used to be so full of life and have goals and dreams. And now my situation has led me to think that I can't want those things because it will harm my body. Now I can't even work. I can't control my emotions and I get panic attacks every day. I have anxious attachment issues and my confidence is declining. It all started after a heartbreak, but got worse after a miscarriage at 5 months. I feel everything. I'm tensed most of the time and I'm scared when I'm alone. Sometimes I feel vibrations in my body as well. I just need to learn how to move through my emotions and not feel stuck. I honestly don't know what to do anymore. So, like, I can feel that, like, that's extremely difficult. Just give me 1 second. That, like, that is a really, really difficult experience. And so I really want to say that you're not doing a single thing wrong. And I just want to read through this again. Even what you were vulnerable in sharing like the miscarriage. That is like a really deep pain, that happens especially with women. And so everything that you described, like um, yeah, panic attacks and confidence is declining. So the good news is, even though this is a difficult process, is that all of that stuff that you're kind of talking about, that all these like really bad experiences that you're having, they all really just have to do with emotional suppression. So as we've been talking about. So an example of emotional suppression is you want to cry, you feel all of that deep emotion, but you hold it in because we've all been taught like, oh, adults don't cry, right? Why am I going to be crying like a little child here? And so I'm trying to think of, let me see, because this question is basically how do we kind of, in the best way possible, explain how to start connecting with your emotions? Well, the first thing I would say, if crying is possible, so if you kind of get very emotional, if that's already possible for you, that's great. And I would say that crying is the most important thing that you could ever do to heal your nervous system. So it can be everything that you mentioned, like your confidence is declining. It can feel so complex. Like, how the hell am I going to fix my life? How am I? It seems impossible when you think when you're starting to when you're thinking of how to solve this stuff, right? That's how our mind works. It's very simple because instead of trying to fix it, find a solution, like I have to think of a way out of this, the solution is only your emotion. So, like I said, if crying can happen for you, go in the direction of that. Play sad music, do whatever you can to cry, and you'll notice that certain things will trigger you. And then you have that big energy here, like you need to cry. And then let yourself cry as long as possible. And you will see that eventually in that moment, that all of that pain is gone. But the thing is, sadly, we have so much pain that you're going to have to do this over and over, basically every time that you feel like you need to cry. And the other thing, which is, I've talked about in the video already, is anger. Um, do you, you can say something, Joel. Do you think it's like we should talk about that too, or?
Yeah. I mean, I was just, obviously agree with everything that you said, but just the volume of difficult circumstances that um, Nicole has been through, sort of back to back. There's going to be a lot that's like right here, you know, ready to be released, and um, the fact that you're tense all the time, experiencing panic attacks would be a very natural bodily reaction to having that, the sort of doors to your emotions just almost bursting, but not quite because you're, trying to keep it together, which of course is the expected natural thing to do. Um, but just to reassure that to let that out, and as Steve said, if crying is available, then I guess it's worth reinstating every video and almost every question that, because of how heavily we programmed our around crying, and just how unexpected it is for the spiritual journey to be an endless, seemingly endless experience of crying. But even for me, it's still an amazing realization that it's just every day, and that we're programmed not to want to hear that, but we'll probably say it like every multiple times, every single Q&A. But then you were saying about anger, Steve, is in like just to reinstate that releasing anger is part of the same process. Is that what you were gonna say?
Yeah, but I just thought of something, which is maybe to give her like very practical tips because
Mhm.
so the first thing is because pretty much all adults have learned to not cry, and it's seen as like I'm an adult and adults don't cry. We have a giant resistance to crying, and how that will manifest in your experience is that probably trying to look at this pain. So the miscarriage is probably the most painful thing that happened to you recently. And so if you were to, let's say, close your eyes and try to remember what happened to you, that's probably where you don't want to go because it could be like so unbearable. It can feel like torture, right? And so the tips that I want to give you is basically first to know that there will be a giant amount of fear if crying is not very easy right now. So if you do experience a lot of fear, first it's normal, it's part of the process. And you can control how slowly you do this process. So if it feels like unbelievably overwhelming, just stop for that day, right? And try the next day. Or if you feel, I don't know if you're busy with work and everything, you are the one that controls the pace of this. So to make it realistic and to make it actually something that will work for you instead of you trying to go so deep in one day and then you give up because it's like unbearable. So this is like going back to it. So it's like if you try, you close your eyes and it's unbearable. Well, try again later. And then slowly, it's like you're dipping your toe in the water and seeing that, yes, there's a lot of fear, but the fear doesn't really do anything, right? After the whole experience, you're like, okay, I didn't die. Nothing bad happened to me. So I can go back to it later. And you're getting used to fear. And the more that you get used to fear, the easier it will be to cry. And then, just to say it again, basically all of that stuff that you're going through to kind of alleviate all of that is just like crying and crying. Like the phrase that's in my mind is like the spiritual path is you becoming really great at crying, and it becomes second nature. Like, oh my God, I'm feeling all of this suffering, I'm going to cry in the bathroom just to release it. Because At first, it can feel horrible, but like I said, as you experiment with it and you go deeper and deeper, crying will become easy. So that's another really important thing to say because if you try it and you're like, holy crap, this is the worst thing I've ever experienced, it's not going to be that way forever. And so yeah, and then the anger, I'm not sure if she's also experiencing it, but it's basically the same thing. So I would say that most of it is crying. But if you ever notice that you're very irritated or you feel very bitter, right? I noticed this in on my journey where I was allowing myself to be a very bitter person, complaining about my life and everything. And then after like 20 minutes, I was like, wait a minute, this is not just bitterness. Actually, if I go deep into it, I'm like so angry, I'm so full of rage and so that's another explanation of how something on the surface can feel like kind of small. Like I don't think I have much anger, but if you're willing to look at it, it will probably open up and then you're like, wow, this is huge. And then, releasing anger, all of this stuff that we talk about is always done in private when you're alone and there's nobody around, right? So that you don't hurt people with your anger. And so it could be simple things. I mean, if anger is also difficult, in the beginning, it's just maybe saying things out loud that you're scared to say. So if somebody irritates you, let's say you just spoke to them and they turn around and they're gone, they won't hear you, then you can say something mean that you wanted to say. That is you beginning to embrace your anger. And later on, like we've said, it can be a little bit more physical. For a few seconds, you can do something like that, or you can show the middle finger, really, whatever it is that expresses that anger. And I want to stress that whether it's crying or releasing anger, this is something that you're doing in that moment to release it in that moment. So if I'm feeling like a lot of anger and I do this for a few seconds, maybe I have to do it multiple times. I'm doing it so that this angry energy gets smaller and smaller right now. So if I have this anger here and it's very big and I do something, okay, it's a little bit smaller, then do something else and you're releasing until it's gone. So crying or releasing anger is to actually release it in the moment it's happening. This is not something, it's not for you to become an angry person at people. It's for you to deal with your anger to such an extent, you release it so much that maybe the person that just triggered your anger, if you released it in the bathroom by yourself, maybe you'll speak to them again and feel nothing. You're not angry at them anymore. So this is what, we're talking about. It's to release and to free you, and then you go back to whoever you're talking to and you've released it. You've unburdened this from yourself.
Yeah. And again, very like practical tools, as if there's things that trigger your tears and crying, there's things that really make you, instantly lump in the throat and want to cry. You can use those just on a very, very practical level just to start the process. Um, because if it's there to come and you have a reliable source, you can't always use the same things every time. It's not like you can be like, oh, I'm going to cry now. But if you feel it's possible, then that can be a very practical thing to do. Like videos that are particularly emotional memories, these sorts of things. And if there's any resistance to crying, there's like, voices in your head saying that it's not acceptable or like ideas of people judging and shaming you. You can just think that we're here and like, the community's here sort of cheering you on to to do it. So um yeah, I think just because you summed it up very clearly in that last sentence about just wanting to move through the emotions and not feel stuck. And it's great that you identified that word through because it's always going to be through and not around or under or anything like that.
Yeah, and it just gave me an idea. Maybe we could post this somehow. Is sort of a playlist of sad music because I've got a lot of stuff like that, and
Yeah.
that could help people. And yeah,
Yeah,
I think
yeah, that's very true. Yeah, we can do a category of crying tools.
yeah. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna answer Civia's first, just because we did. I think the first one was Beata's, right? So
Yeah.
okay, so oversharing. I've had this problem for years and I can't seem to stop doing it. I tend to overshare with really anyone who I can, whether it's something about good or bad that's happening in my life. I don't know if it comes from a place of loneliness or the need for validation or connection. But after I overshare, I get upset with myself later and regret it every time. I tried therapy so that I had an outlet to overshare, uh, but I still seem to still do it. I was just wondering if anyone else deals with this and what I can do about it. So it's funny because when I read this, I don't know, I think it was yesterday, the day before, the first thing that came to mind is, if you look at what you just shared, Sivia, it's like to me, it's almost like sweet and innocent. It's like there's nothing even bad about it. And there's also something, you actually said it, loneliness or a need for validation or connection. I think that it's exactly that. And that's why it's so innocent. And so it's like if you find yourself either alone a lot or some people in your life you can't really share deep things, then what you want the most is to be seen. So what you want is you're saying these things and you're sharing because you literally want eyes, somebody's eyes to be looking at you when you share what you're going through. And so of course it is a need for connection, and we all need that, right? So the what else can I say about this? Because you get upset. I think maybe you're embarrassed that you share too much. Um, I think that I don't know exactly which. Do you have something, Joe?
Yeah, just to build on your point that the sort of shame of being seen is happening, that there's things that you're sharing and shame is coming up, embarrassment, shame being the same kind of thing. Um, I've just kind of lost the second half of my point, but it was about uh the shame being connected to the things that you're sharing and then wanting to link that to how to get to the emotions that are attached to these things. Um, but yeah, I need a second to let it come back. Um,
I think that what was I going to say? It's like we're both forgetting what. Um, so remember how I said that doing things on purpose is a very powerful thing. So, you know, you've been doing this almost like I can't help but overshare. And so that's not on purpose, right? So the next time that you feel this need, I would say don't try to like stop it. Don't say, "Oh, I'm not going to share." And instead kind of lean into it and literally say to yourself, you're about to like speak to someone and you say, I'm going to overshare now. You're saying that to yourself. This is to make it completely conscious. And when you're done, and then if the shame comes, like you regret it, you know, it sucks because all of this is very uncomfortable. But, every time that you feel that, it's actually good. And I'll give you an example. When I don't know if I said this example last time, but I think in every country when you're driving, there's the stop sign. And especially here in Canada, police are always checking. So if police are watching and then you don't stop 100%, they give you a ticket, right? So that happened to me. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to change the way that I drive and I'm going to stop now completely. And what started to happen is when there was a car behind me, nobody wants you to stop 100% because everybody's like, let's go, right? Move. And then I started to notice this unbearable experience that if I knew that I was going to have to stop 100% and I'm almost feeling like the driver behind me wants to kill me, which is actually just my shame, right? I can't feel directly into the other person's experience. So that feeling, it's being triggered by a person. I feel like they're going to be angry at me, but it's just happening within me. And so what happened is I had to stop at stop signs hundreds of times now. And it took a long time. It must have been like 100 times that I felt that it was so unbearable that at times I almost didn't want to stop. I had to like force myself because it was horrible. And after feeling it 100 times, well, guess what? Now it's almost like it's not there anymore. And so I'm saying that because every time you feel that regret and the shame, it's actually leaving your nervous system. But again, it sucks so bad that there's so much of it that you could do this for a while and then think this is not changing, but it just takes a lot. And um and just to say once again, like um I think that the role of a teacher. Some people think that healing, one of the illusions in the spiritual community is that there are healers. And so imagine like my hand is a person, I'm going to heal them directly, right? By doing something with my hand. And that doesn't exist. You can't heal somebody directly. What you do is you try to transmit the unconditional love that, so for example, me, the unconditional love that I've been able to kind of embody within myself and try to transmit that to you so that you start learning to do that for yourself. And so, like I said, the first thing I thought was sweet, and what was the other thing I said? Sweet and
Innocent.
innocent and innocent. And it really is. It's almost like you shared that and you think there's something wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong. It's almost like I'm sorry that you that you need connection maybe and you don't have it right now. And so it's I see almost like a child. Imagine like a child and they're crying and then if they somehow could think this crying is wrong, but it's like you're never going to think a crying child is wrong. You're just going to want to hold them until they feel better. And so I feel the same way.
Yeah. And by doing this, and it's also you that's labeling it as oversharing. You are just sharing. It's
Yeah.
your it's your judgment that deems to be sharing a certain amount is unacceptable, um, and that is a bad thing, and that no one wants to hear that, and it's shameful, and you're going to be rejected because you wasted someone's time or something, or you just shared something that was embarrassing. That's not the truth, but that's what's happening. So it's kind of like a good spiritual practice as well because you're seeing more of what you deem to be unacceptable in yourself. So there's a lot to see, as you're doing this supposed oversharing, which is just sharing. Um, so you can see like what is it like the things that you're saying that make you sort of recoil and contract? Is it like, oh, I shouldn't have said that about myself? Or is it just being someone who shares their experience maybe at length is like a very unacceptable thing? Um, and then that just loops back to what Steve said about just doing it over and over again and seeing what's there. Because the more that you do, the more that you see of yourself as you do it, acceptance comes bonded to it as well. The more that you see, the more you accept. So the pain of your own judgment will decrease as you see more of what's there. And you're always welcome to share to your heart's content here as well.
Yeah. And I was going to say there's also the world that we live in, unfortunately, we all have so much pain that then I think some unintentional gaslighting happens, like with ourselves, which is, I think when she shares, there are certain people, especially if she's sharing things like she's saying, oh, it's too much, right? And there are certain reactions coming from people,
Mm,
looks or comments. And then Sylvia thinks that the problem is with what she's sharing. And in reality, I'm not saying that the people are a problem, but in a sense, it's more them because this is what's so sad. Most of us, I think everyone, we don't have a connection with people that are, it's kind of sounds almost like I'm judging them, but we don't have connection with people that are deeply, deeply loving. And so we don't even know that that's possible, and then we blame ourselves. So it's like if Sivia was sharing with someone that is extremely loving, she wouldn't feel judged, and then she wouldn't even think she's oversharing because the person would have interest and
yeah.
would care to connect and maybe notice, oh, like she really needs attention, and I'm glad to give it to her. So
Mhm.
that's an interesting thing of gaslighting yourself, thinking, oh, I'm wrong, when in reality it's because people will project their pain onto you and they'll give you a look or something, and there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with what you're sharing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That those sorts of reactions are a judgment of them not deeming that to be acceptable within themselves and has nothing to do with you whatsoever. It's very difficult though, because of course we
Very
react to
different.
people's judgments.
I would even say that she's not doing this as a practice, it's just natural. But if someone were to do that as a spiritual practice, that's a very difficult practice to like
Yeah.
share, like where you're kind of feeling like, whoa, that this is too much, and then you get a look from someone or a comment. That's kind of a very intense practice of looking at your shame. So if
Mm,
it's difficult, that's it's almost like like I said, an advanced level of facing your shame.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this is from Radhika. I have a question about choosing peace, lightness, and trust after being in the darkness for so long. I've lived a lot of my life out of fear, scarcity, doubt, and I have shut down many facets of myself to stay safe where there was danger. Ironically, over time, there's a real comfort that developed in that place because it's all I know. And of course, naturally, we adapt. Now I have the genuine opportunity to let in something other than suffering by just letting myself exist with some peace, trust, happiness, instead of only fear and pain. I'm not used to going with what my heart wants, and choosing it is hard, and it can feel like an unviable option, though I honestly think it's my only path forward. Light feels still feels like something that's over there, and reaching for it can feel like a task. I definitely hesitate to choose it, and I know I have some grief that makes it harder for me to lean into it because it's painful. So how do you let in and trust peace and calm or vulnerability after years of it being dangerous? How do you get it to stick? And what's the best way to manage that grief when it's not always easily accessible to feel through? Okay, so I also have to like kind of read through it again. Um, or do you have something, Joe?
Um, I think we'll have to go through it again, piece by piece, but an initial thing that struck me is that Radhika is describing peace as something that's out here and that's to be chosen to go toward. So I just need to understand what is being described as this external peace. Um, because to completely simplify it, we'll get to a point in the discussion where we'll figure out where the emotional block's happening and then processing the emotions, and then peace comes from within, of course. Peace is there, peace is already there underneath everything. So you will find peace from going through this process. There's no peace to be found somewhere else. There's no peace to be acquired by choice, choosing it somewhere, a choice where I have option A and option B. B will not lead to more peace if it's an external something. So I can certainly say that in a general sense, and we can find the specific the specifics within that process. But I can firmly assure that peace is something that uh, will be a state that comes from your own emotional processing.
Yeah, and I think the first thing that you said, which is I think important to like, I'm just gonna kind of give you a visual. Peace is not, what did you say? It's like it's not something you can go and have like, oh, here's some peace.
Yeah, you can't make a choice to go towards peace as in like an external thing. Um, it doesn't exist out there. There's no peace to be found out there.
So yeah, what I was going to explain is that peace is our natural state. So it's not something that it's not an emotion. So like, oh, I can feel angry now, then I can feel sad. It is a completely different thing. So I'm just going to use this Kleenex box as imagine that this is the background, which peace is always here. If you're not experiencing it, it doesn't mean that it's not here. It means that there's something in front of it. And you can have the experience that the peace is gone. So this is what might be happening with her. That's why she's like, "Oh, I've been feeling all of this pain, maybe almost consistently, where her experience is never pain for like probably periods of her journey. And therefore, if she has a glimpse of peace, it has the same quality in her experience as emotions. So here's some grief, here's some, all of this darkness. And if I get a little glimpse of peace, it's just like these things. Or in reality, to use this analogy, this is the background of peace that is always with us. And when there's a lot of emotional pain, it covers it up and you get very busy looking at this and feeling the emotions. But the peace is right here. It never moved. And the emotions never even touch the piece. It's just in front of it and creates the illusion that the piece is gone. And so I just wanted to say that. And so, two things about this. Number one is there is this kind of illusion that gives you the sense that peace comes and goes, which is in meditation, especially if people are using meditation to escape pain, which is very, very common. So if you close your eyes and you meditate and you're able to kind of get to that meditative state where you feel amazing and it's like there's nothing, especially emotional pain, there's just none of that. Then it feels like, oh, I've reached peace. It wasn't here, and now I can feel the peace. But what we're always sharing is that the emotional release, which is mostly crying, but also releasing anger, is what basically cleans up this stuff in front of the piece. The piece is here. It has always been here since you were born. And then let's say that there is like a lot of tears in this moment. There's a lot of tears. You don't feel peaceful. If you cry all the way through, you feel more peace. But the thing is that there's a more, I don't know if I could call it permanent peace, which is going to require a giant amount of crying. So I had this experience where I reached a certain threshold where I had cried maybe 1,000 times. It's gonna scare some people, but it's like I cried, let's say, 1,000 times, and then I started to notice that this experience of peace was becoming more of my ordinary experience. It's not like something that I have to get to. It's always here, but then pain comes and it becomes what maybe blurs the peace a little bit. And then as I kept releasing in the last 6 months, the peace has become more permanent and more permanent. And yet I'm still endlessly releasing. And so I think that's an important point, which is the more that you cry and the more that you release anger and also feel fear, eventually you will see in your direct experience that peace is your natural state and has always been with you. It's just that there's so much in front of it that you think it's not there. You don't have the experience of it.
Yeah, I think that can be it's very intimidating, but it's also, I think, can be a very reassuring thing that like infinite peace is already here and it's just being blocked by layers and layers of suffering. And it's about finding uh, what works for you to get to be able to reduce to cry and release that to find the peace that's always there. Um,
And I think that at the very end is we sort of answered it, but let's see if I can make it any more direct. How do you get it to stick? Which is, so how do you let in and trust peace and calm or vulnerability? So I think it's, yeah, important to stress it again. It's like you don't even have to worry about that stuff, basically. It's like you're saying, how do I let this stuff in? It's almost like forget about peace. And the more that you release, peace is a byproduct or is a consequence of releasing emotion. So you never have to worry about where do I find it? That actually is impossible because if you're trying to, where do I find it? Sometimes I feel it, but where did it come from? It comes from a moment where your mind is more quiet, there's no negative thoughts and nothing has triggered you. So you might be feeling pretty comfortable in your body. That's a moment. And so why doesn't it stick? Because there's a giant amount of emotional pain. That's why it doesn't stick. And so if you want to think of someone that is completely enlightened, I think the Buddha was or Jesus, if they were, this is someone who released all of their pain, right? So if they were permanently at peace and they can't feel a fear of judgment coming from other people, they can't get angry because someone insulted them. There's just peace, peace, peace. It is because like a container of pain, they had to work through all of it, releasing, releasing. And then when there's nothing, then you can actually see the truth that has always been here. There's just peace. So, yeah.
yeah. I'm just trying to work out if there's like a specific example in Radhika's. She says, "I'm not used to going with what my heart wants, and choosing it is hard, and it can feel like an unviable option, though I honestly think it's my only path forward." Um, and I'm not sure if that means like what you want to be doing physically, like maybe like a job or a relationship or a choice that takes your life experience in one way or another. Um, because as you work with your emotions, the choices that are best for you, I think, become a lot clearer as well. So I'm just sort of deviating a little bit away from these choices in life, are either like to the dark or to the light. Um, that may seem how they are, um, but I think things get recontextualized quite dramatically as you start to do this emotional work, and your external circumstances, although they may or may not change, your relationship to them will change dramatically. And the intensity of the like this or that options in the external will seem very different. They will not relate to going this way is what the heart wants and will bring peace and light, and that way will do the opposite. That sort of dynamic will shift a lot. Um, but yeah, maybe you could just give us a follow-up question, Radhika, with like a concrete example of what's happening in your life right now that we could discuss. It might be further helpful to sort of guide how to start doing the emotional work um, practically.
Yeah, I wanted to say things like click into place. So when she says being in the darkness for so long, what that I think means, so I'll just give you like this like scenario. Someone could have depression for 20 years, and in those 20 years, they're like in hell. Sometimes it's a little better, but it's never like peace. It's never. So they're always in hell. For those 20 years, that person may never shed a single tear. So this is what so if you spend all of that time, and it's not your fault, right? But if you spend all of that time feeling horrible, depression is literally a million tears that are not being cried. That's literally what depression is. And so if you've been in darkness for a long time, maybe because that's we would need more information, is even if sometimes you cry, our nervous system is still, even if you cry sometimes, it could still have a really big blockage to crying. And what I wanted to say is that quote from the Bible, which is, unless you are like little children, you will not, enter the kingdom of heaven, which literally means, I think it's actually very appropriate for this crying thing that we're always talking about, because little kids, like 2 years old or 3 years old, when they're still natural and they're not afraid to cry, they're not embarrassed to cry. They cry over anything, anything. If you don't give them a cookie, if it's just crying, 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 crying. And so that's literally what we're talking about. So to make it as practical as possible, let's say that you said it's hard for me to follow my heart. I can't find it. Whatever is difficult for you to do, and let's say that you do it. It could be before or after. So let's say that this is a difficult experience for you. The more that you're becoming a little child, you can either cry before you face the fear or after, depending if you're able to face the fear. So if you're like in this agony, oh my God, it's so much suffering, then cry like like you can, even if there are no tears, just do the physical action of crying or after. So I think it can be very confusing unless it's like incredibly practical, because people don't realize that we're not supposed to be just suffering endlessly. Or, if you face a fear, and let's say you have a fear of speaking to someone and you're, half an hour in this agony, oh my God, this is too scary. Should I do it? Should I not do it? And then you finally do it, right? And then you face the fear, nothing went wrong, you didn't get hurt. And then let's say that you're alone and then you just cry because that was so hard. So do you see how like innocent that is, where it was such a difficult experience that why wouldn't you cry? What, like, just think about it. That experience shouldn't be so difficult if you weren't abused and hurt, right, as a child. And so it's incredibly sad that sometimes just speaking to another human being can be such a difficult experience. So of course you would cry. That's horrible to experience. And so think of crying as like a little pressure valve that releases. You do something, you see a sad scene in a movie, it is good to cry, right? If you're around people and you don't want to cry in front of them, just go to the bathroom and do it, right? And if 2 seconds of crying. This is how you change your entire experience with your emotions, is realizing that, we're filled with so much pain that we should actually be crying all the time. It's kind of funny. We should be crying all the time until one day we've cried so many tears that we kind of emptied out all of those moments when we couldn't cry. And then it's not just like you either feel horrible or you have no more tears and you feel amazing. There are like stages where you slowly, wow, something has changed forever. Like I'm feeling a little bit more peace, or I'm able to speak to people more easily. Yeah. Okay. I think there's just one left, which is I think Beatas.
Yeah.
Okay. It's funny. I don't know if this is, yeah, I think even this, I'm going to share this. Um, I was going to say it's ADD, but now I realize that everything is probably emotional, emotional pain. In school, so I have to read this stuff, right? In school, because of all my trauma and things, I had really bad panic attacks when I had to read things out loud, and everybody's listening, like 30 kids, and I'd have to read a paragraph. And I had these horrible panic attacks where I literally one time I had this was like when I was I think probably 17 already. And I started reading it was like a novel. And you've seen like people, I think, on even like the Weatherman happened to him, where your speech, you start to not be able to say the words because you're having like an attack, right? And so when I'm reading this stuff, I'm getting a tiny bit of that. It's I don't know if I also have a thing where if there's a lot of text all like jumbled together, there's something in my mind that I lose myself. And then I think some people would call that ADD or
Mm.
whatever. And I'm realizing that probably no. That even this, because you know what? When I'm reading the words, there's a part of my mind that's worrying about something, and that's why I kind of lose myself. So you see, this worrying is emotional pain.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share that. So, okay, this one is called Ego Dissolving. Since my awakening started, I've been experiencing strange feelings almost every morning. It started dissipating in the last couple of months or so. But in the past, it was so intense, I would be afraid to go to sleep at night because I knew it would happen when I wake up. It's hard to find words to describe it, so I will try my best. Waking up with feelings of terror, despair, fear, shame, sadness all at once. My body feels like it's being electrocuted. It feels like as I know, is scattered into a million pieces, as if I have dissolved into air, yet I am aware of all of that. In the past, I have always tried to ground myself, bring all of the pieces of me back together. I will tell myself, I am Beata, I am a mom, I have a job, I have a house to live, I survived the worst, I am safe, all is good. After maybe 15 minutes, I am back to be me in the body, but I will be in such confusion and fear, I would cry for about an hour. A few days ago, that feeling came back in the morning, but this time, instead of grounding myself, I decided to feel that feeling. It was the most terrifying moment I've experienced. Every cell of my body was dying. I didn't think I will make it. I felt that's it. However, I've made it. My question is that ego dissolving or some feeling that is coming out to be seen? And what should I do in moments like that? As an info, I have not taken any psychedelics or anything like that. Awakening just started happening on its own. Not sure if that helps. Thank you. So, um, I'm glad that you did that. So you, what did you say? Instead of grounding myself, I decided to feel that feeling. Um, so, that's actually really a great thing to talk about because it is absolutely understandable that this sort of thing, you said it's the most terrifying thing, horrifying thing. So of course you're trying not to feel it, right? It's terrible. But then when you chose to feel it, at first it's probably like a torture, but then you see nothing happen. Um, and your last question, is that the ego dissolving? Yeah, you can call it that because although you can say that the ego is also beliefs, like belief systems, I'm ugly, I'm not lovable. The real, if you imagine the ego as a building, I would say that it's like most of it is just emotional pain. And so when you go into a feeling, so I think that that was more, you also mentioned that you were crying for an hour. So there was a giant amount of fear. So that's one of the main emotional pain. So you felt a lot of that, and then there was a lot of grief, a lot of crying. What was I going to say about that? That is the ego dissolving. So that's why we're always saying that, endlessly crying is the ego dissolving. And it's so simple because again, our mind tries to think like, how am I going to solve all of these problems within me? And the solution is crying most of the time or feeling anger. And see, this is an example of fear. It's more difficult, I think, or more rare for you to feel fear unless you're like always trying to face fears, and you're going to feel it usually in the gut very strongly. Um, but I don't know if I have anything to add. Yeah, these moments are incredibly difficult, and you basically just get through them. And I want to say again, like if it's too much, like at the first time she grounded herself, and so she actually kind of escaped it. That is fine, right? If it's like unbearable, give yourself the time, slowly try it again and again, and then that's on some day you will be able to face it. And isn't it funny how we are literally terrified to just feel emotions in the body? That's literally all it is. And people often trigger our fears. So if we have a fear, like I can share here, it's kind of funny to say I have a fear of women. It sounds like I'm running away from them or something, but I have really deep issues with women, especially if they're attractive to me. And you know, a moment where let's say I would face a fear and speak to a woman, um, the funny thing is that I'm not afraid of her. That's what it seems like, right? It seems exactly that. I'm afraid of the woman. In fact, what I'm afraid of is what happens in my body when I go up to the woman. So I go up to the woman, and then there's like a huge amount of shame and fear. So what I'm afraid of is not the woman, but the sensation in my body. And the reason why these moments are unbelievably difficult is because we're only at the beginning of exploring that sensation. So if you explore the sensation of fear in the body enough times, it's like anything. You're used to it. You're familiar. Oh yeah, here comes that feeling again. And then your entire body is not like, saying, no, no, you don't do it, don't feel it. It's more like, okay, it's uncomfortable, but here it comes again. So whether it's crying or feeling anger or fear, just to give you everybody listening some hope, all of this just gets easier and easier and easier until it becomes almost pleasurable. Like it's almost like, oh, thank God I can finally cry and release all this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to say that when the ego is in a moment of particular, if it's not like actively being more dissolved then, but it's less recognizable to itself because of whatever's happening. Those are going to be the most terrifying moments ever because it perceives that as it dying. And it is in a way, it's not dying there and then totally, of course, but it perceives itself as dying, and it's going to freak out beyond belief. Um, but yeah, the more and more you're able to sit with the emotions that come up and cry through them, the more used to this experience you'll get, and you'll be able to sort of witness it as it happens. Um, but it is immensely terrifying. Um, so the yeah, and when you say what should I do in moments like that, I think what you've done is perfect, really.
Yeah. Maybe just a final thing I was going to say about crying. And there are so many, I guess you could call types of tears, although it's just all crying. Um, your heart is opening more and more. And so there are times you can cry at pretty much almost anything. So it's like if you feel a lot of fear, then you cry because it was just difficult. Um, there will be so many tears. I mean, technically, every tear is only for yourself. You're crying for yourself in compassion. That's really what all of this crying is on the spiritual path. And what I was going to say is, yeah, so there are so many tears. Like even if you see maybe older photos of yourself, if you still have them, and you remember that time in your life, that's happened to me. Um, like yesterday, and it was so deep because I've actually deleted all my pictures, and I shouldn't have because it could even help me now in crying. But every now and then I'll find something in an email, or I had this like YouTube channel like probably like almost 10 years ago. And yesterday I saw it and I saw myself, and I was also much, much heavier. I was had a weight problem. And when I saw myself, it was such a deep pain because the level of compassion that I felt for myself, and I remember that person, it was just such a deep, deep sobbing that it's like, and I could see my innocence, like, oh, I shared this thing, and so there's a million reasons why we will cry on the spiritual path for ourselves. Sometimes it will seem like we're crying for others. Like that was kind of more towards after like a long time that I could start crying for other people. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes at first I thought I was just being arrogant, like I'm crying for other people, like it can't be, like it must be some ego thing. But now I can see that it's actually real. It's like when I can see someone, sometimes even spiritually, I can see that they're lying to themselves and they're not doing anything wrong. That's the best they can do. Sometimes even that can make me cry because I know how much pain they're in because I remember my own pain. So it's a funny thing that crying is almost 90%, I would say, of the spiritual path.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess that's everything, right?
Yeah, that's all the questions for this week. So thank you everyone for continuing to ask, and we'll see you in next week's video.